he's in the agricultural business. He said that, of course, he has somebody running the business for him. He said that the guy who runs his business called him. He said that they had just been contacted by the Federal Department of Labor, who has a program that if he will hire new employees, the Department of Labor will pay 90% of their salary. And he said farmers are going to hire them because even whether they need them or not. And so that is just blowing me away that we're already in this deficit that we're, it's something we're going to have to take a look at the state level. The federal deficit is going to hurt us significantly in the coming years. But there's a deficit, but yet the federal government's going to pay 90% of a private industry to pay. All this is to lower the unemployment rate in an election year. I think that's the whole thing. But one of the things that we talk about transportation funding and some of these other things, we have to, as a state, take a serious look at this federal deficit. We cannot sustain it. It's something that we can't ignore. It's not going to go away. If the federal government isn't going to make some very significant cuts in federal spending, we are not going to sustain this budget. This nation is going to go bankrupt. They are going to have to address it. And as a state, we have to be prepared when they address it, because when they start addressing it, most of what they're going to do is start cutting funding that's going to the states. They're going to start cutting Medicaid funding, they're going to start cutting educational funding. That's the low-hanging fruit that they're going to cut. We as a state have to be prepared for that. And that's something that myself and some other senators are starting to look at now. We may even do some legislation next year to say, how are we as a state going to start preparing to cut those ties? Because we know those cuts are going to happen. I mean, it can't be that we're just going to sit back and say, it always works itself out, because it's not. The only way we're going to work out of this deficit is to start cutting, and it's going to have to happen. It's going to be hurtful. I mean, it's going to change the way that we do things. I think in the long run it's going to be better, but otherwise our nation's going to go bankrupt. I mean, China's going to own us if we don't start doing some of this now. And I think, again, Georgia has been on the cutting edge of these things, and I think in the next year or two, we're going to have to take a serious look at what are we going to do as far as a state to sever ourselves from that federal umbilical.
You think a good idea would be starting November 6th?
Yes, absolutely.
I think one of the things that I was hearing is that people, rather than go for a lower paying job, they were willing to stay on unemployment because they made more and they didn't have to work.
Yes.
So we've got to start weaning them from that.
I have a friend, I'm sorry. You don't jump in just. I have a friend that took advantage of that system. I mean, he's a friend of mine, and he turned down 3 jobs because they kept extending the unemployment.
And I've heard employers come to me and say they have job openings available, they've offered people jobs, and people say, can you pay me in cash so I don't mess up my unemployment check?
There you go.
One of the things
As long as we're willing to pay people to stay home, they'll stay home, which is why I've been opposed to extending unemployment benefits.
we just passed in the Senate, the bill's over in the House, and this was a tough one, another one of those tough issues that we took on. The state of Georgia owes, I think it's $700 million.
That's about right.
$700 million to the federal government that we borrowed to pay unemployment. If we don't pay that back in a certain time frame, then they're going to significantly jack up the employer contributions into the unemployment program. So what we did this year is said, all right, and the National Federation of Independent Business and the chambers all came together and supported it, even though it was a quasi-tax increase upon businesses. It doesn't affect the individuals directly, but it will through the businesses. But we have to pay that money back, or they're really going to hit our employment base hard. Is that we started raising at this point the unemployment insurance rates for employers, and pretty much at the employer's request, because they know if we start paying back a little now, we're going to save a huge amount of penalties in the future. But another part of that is that we cut the time that you can be on unemployment significantly. I think it's down to 20 weeks, if I remember right.
There were several adjustments, the length of time, the delay in getting the first check, and various other things.
Because there are jobs out there. They just didn't want to get them.
And these are types of things you're not going to hear a lot. You hear a lot about the charter school bill. And in reality, we have spent very little time in the Senate on after it passed out of the House. And one of the things I was surprised to find out in the House is some of the most vocal supporters of the 1162 were the members that have been school superintendents, were some of the biggest proponents of that bill. We haven't spent that much time in the Senate because honestly, we're 2 votes short of passing it. And so it's, till the governor can tweak a couple more votes out of the Democratic caucus, basically what it comes down to. We haven't spent that much time on it. These are the things we've been spending most of our time on,
Which
these
is
tough issues.
ironic about the Democrat caucus in the Senate, because the Democrat caucus in the House were some of the most outspoken supporters of the bill. So it was very much a bipartisan effort in the House. John, we're out of time, I think. Do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I think there was one more question. Were you going to ask?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of piggyback on what y'all were saying. An idea that I was thinking of was, I work for a staffing company. So the hard part of trying to get people to come work for a day or two, is what you guys were saying, was they lose their unemployment benefits. And then they've got to wait a week or two, something like that. This argument is kind of counterintuitive, but an idea that we've been kind of tossing around is, how about making it where it's easier for them to, if they've been laid off from a factory they've been at for 5 years, they were to get a temporary job for a couple of weeks. At least they're paying into, or at least the employer then is paying into the unemployment fund for that 2 weeks, and then they can get back on that unemployment if we were to lay them off for after 2 weeks. Make it easier for them to get back on that. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but at least during that 2 weeks, they're gaining some more necessary skills, as well as that employer is paying into the fund, versus like what you guys were saying was, which we hear all the time, every day, I can't take that job because, yeah, that job may pay $9 an hour, but I can make $8 an hour unemployment and I don't have to pay for gas. So I don't know if maybe that's an idea or something that maybe.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and we're open to all ideas. We've had even, you have to do community service if you're, we're open up to any ideas. That's pretty good.
I'm an employer. I'm talking with the state labor department. If I lay someone off, they can come back to work for me during the period that they're laid off. And they can make up $299 a week and not be penalized on it.
Well, what amazes me about all this, on one side, we've got minimum wage laws, which I'm not a proponent of because I believe businesses need to have that flexibility in times like this, because you may not be able to pay someone the full unemployment, but you can pay somebody a part of that and get them on. You can't do that. So you got, on one side, the federal government says that you can't pay somebody $100 a week to come and do work for you, but we'll pay them $299 a week to do that. That's the irony of it.
Join unemployment. They draw their unemployment and they can make, with me, $299. Still draw their unemployment and still draw a check with me. And take out taxes on them and everything.
Any other questions? What's wrong with this picture? Did you learn anything? You want to do it again?
Yes.